When they returned from Raqqa, Josh had told him, "This is my last operation." 48 hours later, Josh was dead, and Rusty still thinks he couldn't save him. The file Rusty Cole held in his hands had remained classified for 18 months. The records CIA deleted from Operation Black Cross, but one copy had been forgotten. But the truth behind Josh's death was much darker than this. That night in Anbar, there were only two choices: save Josh or complete the mission. Rusty could see his friend's bleeding body through his scope. The commander was screaming over the radio, "Continue, take the shot." 1 second of hesitation, one life, one choice, and that's when he understood why the CIA deleted the records. In the Black Cross file, Josh's name appeared twice, once as KIA, killed in action, and once as asset compromised, elimination required. The bullet that killed Josh came from Rusty's rifle. Rusty Cole wasn't supposed to survive that night in the tunnels beneath Mosul. According to the official record, Operation Black Cross never existed. No team was deployed, no shots were fired, and certainly no one died in those concrete corridors that smelled like diesel fuel and death. But Rusty remembered differently. He remembered the weight of his Barrett M82 against his shoulder, the green glow of night vision painting everything in alien shadows, and the sound of Josh's breathing through the comm system growing more labored with each step they took deeper underground. The tunnels had been a maze of reinforced concrete and rusted steel, built by ISIS fighters who understood that the Americans would eventually come for them. What they didn't understand was that the Americans weren't coming for ISIS that night. They were coming for one of their own. Rusty remembered the briefing room at FOB Liberty, where a man in civilian clothes with dead eyes had shown them satellite photos of the tunnel complex. "High-value target," the man had said in a voice that betrayed no emotion. "American citizen who's been feeding intelligence to hostile forces, extremely dangerous, shoot on sight." They had shown photos of the target from a distance, never a clear face shot, just a silhouette in desert camouflage, a figure moving through Kurdish territory, someone who looked like any other American soldier. Josh had raised his hand during the briefing. "What's the target's background? Military, CIA, State Department?" The civilian had stared at Josh for a long moment before answering. "That information is classified. Your job is to locate and eliminate, nothing more." Now Rusty understood why they had never shown Josh's face. Because even with their memory suppression protocols, seeing your best friend's face in a targeting photo might have been too much for any soldier to process. What he didn't remember were the 18 minutes between Noan 24/7 hours and Noan 305 hours, 18 minutes that the CIA scrubbed from every official timeline, every after-action report, every piece of evidence that Operation Black Cross ever happened. But memory has a way of surfacing when you least expect it, especially when it's tied to trauma that runs deeper than any psychological conditioning. Rusty had first met Josh Martinez during JSOC selection at Fort Bragg, where both men had been competing for a slot in the Army's most elite sniper program. Josh was the guy who could put 5 rounds through the same hole at 800 yards, but who also carried pictures of his niece's kindergarten drawings in his gear. He was the soldier who never missed a shot, but who cried openly when they had to put down an injured stray dog during a mission in Afghanistan. "You can't save everyone," Josh had told Rusty once, after a particularly brutal operation in Kandahar, where they had arrived too late to prevent a suicide bombing at a girls' school. "But that doesn't mean you stop trying." They had been deployed together for 3 years, through Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Inherent Resolve, and countless black operations that didn't officially exist. They had saved each other's lives more times than either man could count. Josh had pulled Rusty from a burning Humvee in Ramadi. Rusty had covered Josh's extraction when an operation in Syria went sideways and left him pinned down by enemy fire for 6 hours. They were more than partners. They were brothers in the way that only soldiers who had bled together could understand. That's what made the betrayal so complete. Not just that his government had lied to him, but that they had weaponized his love for his best friend and used it to destroy them both. 3 months after the incident, Rusty was sitting in a VA psychiatrist's office in Virginia, trying to explain why he woke up every night at exactly 2:47 a.m., drenched in sweat, and reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. The nightmares were always the same: concrete walls closing in, the sound of breathing that wasn't his own, and a voice calling his name from somewhere in the darkness. Sometimes it was Josh's voice, sometimes it was his own. Dr. Sarah Chen had kind eyes and a patient voice, but she couldn't explain why a simple question about his deployment triggers sent him into a dissociative episode that lasted 40 minutes. She also couldn't explain why his medical records showed treatment for injuries that he had no memory of receiving, or why his psychiatric evaluation mentioned memory reconstruction therapy that he had supposedly consented to but couldn't remember. "Tell me about your last mission," she had said during their first session, her pen poised over a yellow legal pad that seemed to contain notes about him from before they had ever met. "There was no last mission," Rusty replied automatically. the response drilled into him during 3 weeks of debriefing at a facility that didn't officially exist in Pine Gap, Nevada. My deployment ended with routine patrol duty in the green zone, but even as he said it, his right hand unconsciously moved to his left shoulder, where a scar ran from his collarbone to his armpit. A scar that, according to his medical records, came from a training accident at Fort Bragg 2 years earlier. A scar that burned every time he heard the sound of concrete cracking, or the echo of footsteps in enclosed spaces, or the particular frequency of radio static that preceded urgent communications. The scar that he now understood came from shrapnel, when the tunnel complex was demolished to erase all evidence that Operation Black Cross had ever taken place. Dr. Chen noticed everything: the way his pupils dilated when she mentioned certain words, how his breathing changed when she asked about his dreams, the fact that he instinctively checked the exits every time he entered her office, and that he never sat with his back to the door. "You seem uncomfortable," she observed during their third session. "Would you like to talk about something else?" That's when Rusty made his first mistake. He told her about Josh, not Operation Black Cross, not the tunnels, not the 18 missing minutes, just Josh Martinez, 27 years old, from Phoenix, Arizona, who collected vintage baseball cards and called his mother every Sunday without fail. Josh, who had saved Rusty's life in Kandahar when an IED turned their Humvee into twisted metal and fire. Josh, who had been planning to propose to his girlfriend Maria when he got back from their final deployment, and who had already bought the ring, a modest diamond solitaire that he kept in a waterproof case next to his dog tags. "He died in a helicopter crash," Rusty said, sticking to the official story that had been programmed into his memory. "Mechanical failure during a routine transport mission between forward operating bases." Dr. Chen wrote something down in her notes, and Rusty caught a glimpse of what looked like a checklist with his responses. "You seem to blame yourself for something that was clearly an accident." "I was supposed to be on that helicopter," Rusty lied, though he didn't know he was lying. The false memory felt as real as any truth. "Last-minute change in orders kept me behind. I should have died instead of him." But that wasn't the truth, and some part of Rusty's subconscious knew it. The truth was fighting its way to the surface, despite months of conditioning and drug therapy designed to keep it buried. The truth was that Josh Martinez never died in a helicopter crash. He died in a tunnel 40 feet below the streets of Mosul, with a .50 caliber round through his chest, and Rusty's voice echoing off the concrete walls, screaming no at a choice that had already been made. The truth was that in those final 18 minutes, Josh had looked directly into Rusty's scope and recognized his best friend's position, had smiled sadly and mouthed the words, "I understand," before Rusty's training overrode his humanity and he pulled the trigger. The breakthrough came 6 weeks later, during what Dr. Chen called guided recall therapy. Rusty had been resistant at first, suspicious of any treatment that involved what seemed like hypnosis or mind control. But the nightmares were getting worse, and the pills weren't working anymore. He was having blackouts during the day, finding himself in places with no memory of how he had gotten there. Once he woke up on a park bench in Arlington, holding a sniper rifle that shouldn't have existed, with no memory of the previous 8 hours. He needed answers, even if those answers destroyed him completely. "I want you to think about your hands," Dr. Chen said softly, her office dimmed to a comfortable twilight that reminded him of dawn patrol in hostile territory. "What do you remember about your hands during that time period you can't recall?" Rusty closed his eyes and tried to focus. His hands. There had been something about his hands. They had been shaking. No, not shaking. Steady. Professionally, mechanically steady, the way they'd been trained to be during thousands of hours of shooting drills at ranges across 3 continents. His finger on the trigger, applying exactly 4.5 pounds of pressure, the familiar kick of the rifle against his shoulder, the whisper of the 50 caliber round cutting through the air at 2,800 feet per second, traveling the 200 meters between his position and the target in less than a quarter of a second. And then, screaming, his own voice, raw and desperate, echoing in a space that shouldn't have existed according to his official memories. "Josh, oh God, Josh, what have I done?" The memories came flooding back like a dam breaking. Not all of them, not the crucial details that would make sense of everything, but enough to remember that the official story was a lie. Enough to remember that Josh hadn't died in a helicopter crash, but that someone very much wanted everyone to believe he had. Enough to remember the weight of his friend's body as he carried it through those tunnels, and the sound the explosives made when they brought the whole complex down around them. That night, Rusty left Dr. Chen's office and drove directly to a storage unit in Arlington, where he kept his personal effects from his deployment, buried beneath dress uniforms and commendation letters, underneath photographs from missions that officially never happened. He found what he was looking for, a small device no bigger than a pack of cigarettes, with a USB port and a blinking red light, a digital recorder that Josh had given him before their final mission, pressing it into his palm with an urgency that Rusty had dismissed at the time as pre-mission nerves. just in case something happens to me, Josh had said, his voice tight with an anxiety that Rusty now understood had nothing to do with enemy fire or improvised explosives. I've been keeping track of some things that don't add up, things that make me think we're not fighting the war we think we're fighting. The recording was 47 minutes long, and Josh's voice sounded tired, strained, like a man who knew he was running out of time. There were background sounds that Rusty recognized, the hum of generators, the distant sound of helicopters, the particular acoustic signature of a forward operating base in hostile territory. If you're listening to this, then something went wrong, the recording began. And if Rusty is listening to this, then you need to know that everything we've been told about our missions is a lie. According to Josh's investigation, which had taken him 6 months and had involved hacking into classified databases and following money trails through shell companies and CIA-front organizations, their unit hadn't been hunting terrorists in Iraq and Syria. They had been eliminating assets who had become liabilities, American assets, intelligence officers who had gone rogue, military contractors who had discovered too much about illegal arms sales, State Department officials who had been selling information to foreign governments, and in one case, a congressional aide who had been preparing to testify about black budget operations that didn't officially exist. Black Cross isn't counter-terrorism, Josh's voice continued, and Rusty could hear the sound of papers rustling as his friend consulted notes he had hidden from their handlers. It's house cleaning. We're janitors for the intelligence community, and I think we're next on the list. The recording detailed dates, locations, and mission parameters that didn't match anything in their official orders. Instead of targeting enemy combatants, they had been systematically eliminating people who posed a threat to ongoing CIA operations in the region, people who knew too much about weapons sales to Syrian rebels, about oil deals with Kurdish militias, about the real reasons American troops were still dying in places that were supposed to be pacified, people like Josh, who had started asking too many questions and connecting too many dots. Remember that operation in Tikrit last month? Josh's voice asked. We were told we were hunting an Al-Qaeda cell leader, that I ran the target's fingerprints through the system. His name was Michael Stevens, former Army intelligence, worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency. He'd been investigating illegal arms transfers to militia groups, and we killed him on orders from people who were selling those weapons. The list went on. 7 missions, 7 targets, 7 people who had died because they had discovered evidence of crimes being committed at the highest levels of the American intelligence apparatus. And Josh had the evidence. Financial records, communications intercepts, photographs of meetings that were supposed to be secret. Enough evidence to destroy careers, end administrations, and send powerful people to prison for the rest of their lives. I found out about the helicopter, Josh said near the end of the recording, his voice dropping to a whisper. The one they're planning to crash to explain our deaths. Mechanical failure, they'll say. Tragic accident during a routine transport mission. Except we're not supposed to be on that helicopter, Rusty. We're supposed to be dead already. They're planning to eliminate us during the next operation, and then stage the crash to explain why our bodies are never found. Rusty's hands were shaking as he listened to Josh's final words. I don't know what they have planned for Mosul, but it's not what they told us. They're sending us into those tunnels to die, and they're going to use one of us to kill the other. Watch your back, brother. And if something happens to me, find the Black Cross files. Find the truth. Make sure the families know what really happened to their sons. That was 3 months ago. Now sitting in his apartment in Virginia Beach at 3:30 in the morning, Rusty stared at the manila folder that had arrived in his mailbox that morning with no return address and no postmark, just his name written in block letters across the front by someone who clearly didn't want to be traced. Inside, he found photocopies of documents that officially didn't exist. Mission briefs, personnel records, financial transfers, and most importantly, the after-action report from Operation Black Cross, the report that explained what happened during those missing 18 minutes, and why the CIA had needed to scrub his memory to protect their operation. According to the document, Operation Black Cross was a joint CIA-JSOC operation designed to eliminate a high-value target who had been selling American military secrets to hostile foreign governments. The target was identified as Joshua Martinez, Staff Sergeant, United States Army, former Special Operations Sniper, asset compromised. Elimination authorized under National Security Presidential Directive 12, which gave the CIA broad authority to eliminate threats to ongoing operations without congressional oversight or judicial review. The mission parameters were clear and chilling in their clinical precision. Infiltrate the tunnel system beneath Mosul, locate the target, and eliminate with extreme prejudice. Sniper Cole was to take the shot using his personal weapon to ensure ballistic evidence could be controlled. Any questions about the target's identity were to be addressed through the chain of command after mission completion. No communication with the target was authorized under any circumstances. But something had gone wrong. According to the report, Sniper Cole had hesitated when the target was acquired. The target had apparently recognized his partner and attempted to communicate with him, compromising the mission parameters. Radio contact was lost for 18 minutes while Sniper Cole processed the conflict between his orders and his personal relationship with the target. When communication was re-established, the target was dead, but Sniper Cole was exhibiting signs of severe psychological distress and memory fragmentation. Recommend immediate extraction and psychiatric evaluation, the report concluded. Subject appears to have formed inappropriate personal attachment to target, despite clear briefing on target's treasonous activities. Memory suppression protocols initiated to preserve operational security and prevent subject from compromising future operations. They had made him forget, not just the 18 minutes, but the entire truth of what had happened in those tunnels. They had programmed him to remember Josh's death as a helicopter crash, a random tragedy that couldn't have been prevented. They had filled his head with false memories, artificial guilt, synthetic trauma designed to keep him focused on grief instead of anger. But the programming wasn't perfect. Fragments were breaking through, especially under stress. Memories of concrete walls and the echo of gunfire, the weight of his rifle, and the perfect shot that he had been trained to take for 3 years. The moment when he had looked through his scope and seen Josh's face, not the face of a traitor or an enemy combatant, but the face of his best friend. And he had taken the shot anyway, because in that moment, 18 months of conditioning and psychological manipulation had been stronger than 3 years of friendship. The muscle memory had been too strong, the training too thorough, the psychological conditioning too complete. In that split second of recognition, his finger had already pulled the trigger. That was what had broken his mind. Not grief over a friend's accidental death, but the knowledge that he had murdered someone he loved on the orders of people who had lied to him about everything, and then had the audacity to erase his memory to protect themselves from the consequences of their manipulation. The phone rang at exactly 2:47 a.m., jerking Rusty awake from dreams of concrete and gunfire and Josh's voice calling his name through radio static. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but when he answered, the voice on the other end was familiar, though it carried a coldness he had never heard during their therapy sessions. "Hello, Rusty." It was Dr. Sarah Chen, but she sounded different. Professional, distant, like she was reading from a script. "I think it's time we had another conversation." "Dr. Chen, how did you get this number?" He had never given her his personal cell phone, had never even told her he owned one. "That's not important right now," she said. "What's important is that you stop digging into things that were buried for good reason. What's important is that you remember your duty to your country." Rusty felt the blood drain from his face as he realized that their entire therapeutic relationship had been a lie, another layer of manipulation designed to monitor his recovery and ensure that their memory suppression held. "You're one of them. You've been watching me this whole time. I'm someone who's trying to keep you alive," she replied, though her tone suggested that his continued existence was far from guaranteed. "The files you've been looking at, the recordings you've been listening to, you need to destroy all of it and forget you ever saw it. Like you made me forget what really happened to Josh." There was a long pause, filled with the sound of electronic interference that suggested their conversation was being monitored and recorded. "Josh Martinez was a traitor, Rusty. He was selling intelligence to Iranian operatives, compromising ongoing operations, getting good soldiers killed in the field. His death saved American lives." "That's a lie." His voice was steady, but his hand was reaching for the Glock 19 he kept in his nightstand, muscle memory from years of training taking over. "Is it? How would you know? You've been suffering from severe PTSD and memory issues for months. You're not a reliable witness to anything, and any court in the country would agree." Rusty looked down at the black cross files spread across his coffee table, dozens of pages of evidence that contradicted everything she was telling him. "I have documentation. You have falsified documents created by a man who was mentally unstable and paranoid about his own government. Joshua Martinez was building a case against his own unit because he was trying to cover up his treason, to make himself look like a whistleblower instead of a traitor." The lie was so smooth, so professionally constructed, that Rusty could almost believe it. Almost. Then why kill him? Why not arrest him? Why not court-martial him? Why not let him face a jury if the evidence was so clear? Because some secrets are too dangerous to air in public. Because sometimes the mission is more important than justice, more important than the truth, more important than any individual soldier's life. You understand that, Rusty. You're a soldier. You took an oath. He was quiet for a long moment, listening to the sound of his own breathing, and thinking about oaths and loyalty, and the difference between serving your country and serving the people who happen to be in power at any given moment. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to stop investigating. I want you to destroy everything Josh gave you. I want you to burn those files and forget they ever existed. And I want you to go back to therapy so we can help you process your grief in a healthy way and get on with your life. And if I refuse, then I can't guarantee your safety. There are people who think you know too much already. People who would prefer to solve this problem permanently rather than continue managing it indefinitely." Rusty understood. He was being offered the same choice Josh had been given. the same choice that dozens of other whistleblowers and truth-tellers had been given over the years. Cooperation or elimination, silence or death. I need time to think about it. You have 24 hours, Dr. Chen said. After that, the decision will be made for you. And Rusty, don't make the same mistake Josh did. Don't let your conscience override your survival instincts. The line went dead, leaving Rusty alone in his apartment with the truth he had spent months trying to uncover, and a choice that would determine whether he lived to see another sunrise. He had killed his best friend on the orders of people who had lied to him about everything. Josh hadn't been a traitor. He had been a whistleblower who had discovered the truth about their operations and had died for it. And now they wanted Rusty to forget again, to let them bury the truth along with Josh's memory and his own integrity. But some things can't be buried forever. Some memories refuse to stay dead. And some soldiers, once they learn the truth about who they've really been serving, decide that the mission isn't more important than justice after all. Rusty Cole stood up from his couch and walked to his bedroom closet. Hidden behind a false panel that Josh had taught him to install years ago, he found what he was looking for, the backup drive Josh had given him months before their final mission. The drive that contained copies of every classified document Josh had been able to access, every financial record, every communication that proved the existence of a black operation that had been running for 3 years, eliminating American assets who had become inconvenient to people who valued power more than human life. Evidence that would destroy careers, end administrations, expose war crimes, and possibly prevent future operations like Black Cross from ever being authorized. He had 24 hours to decide whether to be a good soldier or a good man, whether to protect the institution that had made him a killer or honor the friend they had forced him to murder, whether to let Josh's death mean nothing or to make sure it meant everything. Rusty Cole inserted the drive into his laptop and began uploading files to a server in Iceland, beyond the reach of American intelligence agencies and their allies. Some secrets, he decided, were too important to keep. Some truths were worth dying for, and some friendships transcended even death and betrayal, and the kind of institutional evil that turns heroes into monsters and then erases their memories to hide the crime. As the upload progress bar crept toward completion, Rusty thought about Josh's last words to him, spoken through a scope sight in a tunnel beneath Mosul. I understand. Now, finally, so did he.